Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for watching us. This is Straight Talk düzdanışaq in the original language in Azerbaijani. We're coming to you from Washington, D.C., and today is the 5th of January, 2023. From time to time, we do prove that we're a trilingual channel, and from time to time, we do provide some English language content for those of us who are watching the situation in our region or maybe in a wider Eurasian region from outside, and to whom Azerbaijani or even Russian are inaccessible languages. So today is no exception. I hope you enjoy our conversation. First of all, I would like to say, please do subscribe and please do support our channel by with your attention, and do share our content if you see fit. I hope our discussion today will be of interest to you, given the events that are happening in our region. My interlocutor today is Farid Shafiyev, chairman of the Center of Analysis of International Relations, a think tank based in Baku, Azerbaijan. A couple of housekeeping things I wanted to mention right now. We Azerbaijanis put a premium on polite conversation and politeness in a conversation. So we have an honorific title that we call each other, either Muallim or Bey. But with my guest today, we decided that we're going to do away with that because the majority of our audience will be from outside of the region. So we call each other by first names. To those of us who are watching us in Azerbaijan, I do understand it sounds a little awkward and a little strange. So please don't read anything into it. It was our decision, the guests and mine. And secondly, we as a channel are trying to provide voices to all parties, all sides of any conflict or any issue, be it the private sector or the public sector. You're more used to hearing from non-governmentals on this channel, but from time to time, we're very happy to speak to the government or the people who know the government's point of view. So today is no exception. We'll be very happy to speak to our Armenian guests and discuss the situation that is going on in Azerbaijan, in Karabakh, from the point of view of our Armenian interlocutors. As always, we're open to them. So if there is an interest, we're here to listen. Let's say hi to our guest, Farid Shafiyev in Baku. Farid, hi and Happy New Year.
Good evening for me and good morning for you.
All right. The new year started. I was surprised to see the continuing situation around Lachin Corridor. So we say. Actually, I get admonished a lot by people for using the word corridor because apparently it is a legal term and it carries a certain meaning of extraterritoriality, some things that I'm learning right now. Let's start from the basics. Is it okay for me to call it a corridor? Is it viewed as a corridor? What does a document say that was signed between Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Russia on 9-10 November 2020? Is that a corridor?
Well, according to the trilateral statement, they use the term corridor, but more kind of, I have to warn, it's the corridor in terms of the logistics, in terms of the transport, not in terms of international law. Lachin is, it's clear from all documents, including United Nations documents, decisions, Lachin, and also trilateral statement, if we look at the whole paragraph related to the Lachin. It's a territory of Azerbaijan, it's the sovereign right of Azerbaijan, jurisdiction of Azerbaijan, and in the same trilateral document, it says that the security and the Azerbaijan fully in charge of the security and the situation of Lachin, as you mentioned, corridor. So it is not a territorial corridor, it's not in terms of the international law, but in terms of logistic and transport, it is corridor.
You and I are reading the same things. We're seeing the same accusations or the same complaints coming from the other side of the conflict, be it the ethnic Armenians of Karabakh or be it Armenians from Armenia and outside and beyond. We're reading about Azerbaijan blockading the corridor. I have interviewed on this channel several people. One is the environmentalist from Azerbaijan who is known to me personally. And I think we've proven that this person is an environmentalist by showing a file video of him talking to our channel 2 years ago when an environmental situation arose. And another person is from a GONGO, let's say government-oriented, non-governmental organization in Azerbaijan, who was also a participant of the events. Dilara Efendieva directly said that the Karabakh is on the verge of a humanitarian crisis. These are her words in Russian. Now, when it comes to the obligations of Azerbaijan, as arise from the document, trilateral document you referred to, you alluded to, does Azerbaijan undertake to provide security of that corridor? In other words, from the standpoint of the Azerbaijani government, is it okay that the people are carrying on a multi-day, multi-week protest in that corridor and impeding traffic?
Well, let's look at the whole document and also generally the whole situation. I would like to, we need to know the context. Lachin region was the first region outside of the former Nagorno-Karabakh autonomy occupied by Armenians in May 1992, exactly on the May 18th. So that was the strategic decision of Armenia and the Karabakh Armenians to have the road for the military supply, also for different kind of supply, but first of all for the military supply. And once they established this kind of route in May, later on, they attacked the another big region of Azerbaijan, Kalbajar, which is north to Lachin, from two directions. That's the known fact during the First Karabakh War, and they occupied two big regions of Azerbaijan. This is indeed, speaking about Lachin, is soaked with Azerbaijani blood, refugees. So it is indeed was a big destruction the whole these 30 years. So we need to know the context about this road. It is a strategic road for Armenian military supply. The second about the ecological issue, also background. Azerbaijan raised repeatedly the issue of illegal mining, pollution, and you can find even on our website of our center. And yes, we are a government-funded center that we launched investigation and we issued report in 2020, in July 2020, before the war, about environmental impact of Armenian occupation. It's available on our website. We updated this report after the war in summer 2021. We presented to ambassadors in Azerbaijan accredited. Unfortunately, despite repeated calls from Azerbaijan side, nobody paid attention. So now about ecological activists, I know I'm quite well aware about skepticism about this ecological movement, but we are talking indeed, and I have to speak frankly, because I talked with many international experts, with diplomats accredited to Azerbaijan. Our demand, there is no question about, demands of Azerbaijani side to stop illegal mining and extraction Azerbaijani resources through Lachin. So this is legitimate demand. And if we look at the statements, even US statements and some other statements about the crisis on Lachin Road, they say that both sides should resolve differences. So yes, they call for the humanitarian supply, etc., but they also call for the dialogue and for the resolution of this problem of illegal extraction and removal. The second, I think, the problem with use of Lachin Road is the military supply, and we know that anyone who served in military, in army, they know it's just not enough to have certain equipment. It's not enough to have the soldiers, and especially we're speaking about Karabakh Armenians with the certain limited supply of soldiers, of human resources. So we know that from Armenia constantly there is this circulation of the equipment, munitions, and soldiers, or the, let's say, military personnel, to Karabakh. And so that should be stopped. So these two issues should be resolved. And coming at the end of my reply to your question whether Azerbaijan, yes, we are responsible for the security, but we are responsible, first of all, for the security of Azerbaijan, for the whole population. If Lachin Road is used to harm Azerbaijani nationals, Azerbaijani citizens, I mean the landmines and the, generally the supplies, so that's the Azerbaijan obligation to act against that.
Hmm. I'm listening to you and showing the map of that area. Can you hear? I hope you can hear me. This map comes from Deutsche Welle, from the source that I personally trust, and I believe the majority of my audience does. And that map is supplied by the Russian Defense Ministry, as it says. I'm kind of curious. We all know that it is quite impossible to hold multi-day or multi-week demonstrations elsewhere in Azerbaijan. But here we're facing a lot of people who the Armenians say are impeding traffic and causing a humanitarian catastrophe in Karabakh. And some of our Azerbaijani non-governmental organizations members do agree that the situation will lead to a catastrophe. Now, my question is, we in Azerbaijan see the citizens of Karabakh, even ethnically Armenian citizens, as our own citizens. Is it worth it to continue doing what is being done? I don't want to call it blockade, but these actions that are being performed, whose interest does it serve? Because if you look from Baku, and correct me, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I misunderstand, the actions of these people are causing suffering to the citizens of Azerbaijan of ethnic Armenian origin. What is the purpose of this? Why does the government allow this to continue? Why does the government not stop this like it would if this were taking place anywhere else in Azerbaijan?
Yeah. Well, again, just briefly to look at the context of the mass population and ecological issues and conflict. In November 1988, we had mass movement regarding the threat to the forest near Shusha, so-called, not so-called, but Tophane. It's called Tophane, but the national liberation movement, not only related to Karabakh, but to independence of Azerbaijan, began exactly from the ecological issue. So this linkage between mass protests and the conflict-related issues, we've seen throughout the occupation and before the occupation in 1980s, even during the Soviet times. And again, before the war, in July 14th, 2020, indeed, it was the people protest and they demanding the government action against Armenian occupation. So I think it was also quite a decisive moment for the government to decide, next attack of Armenian provocation, we're going to launch a big counteroffensive. This is what happened in September. So that linkage always existed. If people don't know about that, they should really study the conflict and the history. Now about what is going on in Lachin and the skepticism. Yes, it is clear, and the government fully supports demands of in terms of ecology, but also the government also put forward our demands with regard to military supply, the presence of illegal military personnel on Azerbaijan territory. Minister of Foreign Affairs issued statements. And today, by the way, Azerbaijan applied to International Court of Justice with another legal suit against the Armenian government. So I think
I'm sorry. What is the reason? What did it cite in that application? What is the complaint?
We have both Armenia and Azerbaijan. We have already applications in International Court of Justice within the framework of the Convention Against the Racial Discrimination. Mm-hmm. So within that convention, we suit each other, and this is another step from the Azerbaijani side, demanding measures against the Armenian government, because what we accuse, Azerbaijan side accuse of Armenian government of supplying landmines, which prevents return of refugees, and also it's poses a security threat to the population. So that's the very fresh action from the Azerbaijani government. So here we have full kind of common interest, population and the government. And as I said, when it comes to the domestic issues, I agree. We have a lot of disagreements within the society, opposition. But if we look what opposition members said about Lachin Road, even 1 year ago, the major opposition parties, major opposition activists, the independent experts, they were demanding when Azerbaijan government is going to act on the Lachin Road. So it's easily we can check it what the opposition said. So here we have the common interest. Now about the part of your question related to our Karabakh Armenians. It's our citizens. We are ready to integrate, and when question arises of if we are going to integrate, why we kind of act against those Karabakh Armenians. First of all, it's not full. It's not blockade. Those activists, or let's say the protesters, they allow the movement. For example, Russian peacekeeping forces, they're moving cargo every day, 10 trucks, 15 trucks, 20 trucks. That's the one thing. The second thing, the Azerbaijani side also allows the movement of Armenians, but they want to check the cargo, whether they have munitions, whether they have something illegal. But that's on the Armenian side. They refuse to be checked. They're referring to this trilateral statement, which it should not be checked. But again, as I said, if we look at the basically comments of many government people, foreign governments representative, no one questions the legitimacy of Azerbaijan demand to stop illegal mining, extraction, and also stop the military supply. And with regard to Karabakh Armenians, we indeed began dialogue with Karabakh Armenians in October. There was some contacts related to Sugovushan water reservoir, and there was some conversation with some other, let's say, local Armenians. But I think this is exactly why Ruben Vardanyan was implanted there, to stop this dialogue, to prevent any kind of rapprochement between Karabakh Armenians and the central government.
Okay, Ruben Vardanyan, we're going to talk about him. It's a Russian billionaire who until recently was a Russian citizen. Then magically overnight he was stripped of the Russian citizenship. And what citizenship he holds and what right does he have to be in Karabakh is another question. I'm afraid you and I are discussing this situation because we're in it and we know what we're talking about. But we might be losing a part of the audience. So there are lots of things to unpack. A part of audience that doesn't know all the details that you and I are privy to. So listen, let me start with this. Let me ask the question very simply. The world is looking at what the Azerbaijani government is doing, and the people of Karabakh are saying, and so are their supporters in the Armenian diaspora here in Washington, are saying, look at them. They're starving us. They're saying we're their citizens. They're starving us. They're not letting cargo through. Vardanyan himself said the Azerbaijanis prevented Santa Claus from coming to our children this year. And the world is listening. The U.S. Congress is listening. Is it okay for the state of Azerbaijan to put some of its citizens in this situation where food prices are going up, there is no food on the shelves, in the name of stopping illegal extraction of gold? This is a question that the Armenian diaspora is asking, and I'm wondering kind of what the response from Baku is.
Yeah, well, first of all, as I said, it's not only about gold, it's about the security and security of our citizens. If the group of citizens threaten the whole security of the country, and this Lachin Road, we should remember that, and people, the foreign audience, again, they should look at the conflict, how dynamic of the conflict has changed after occupation of Lachin in May 1992. So basically, it allowed occupation in 1993, and we lost several regions because the Armenia proper and Karabakh Armenians were established with huge, I wouldn't call it the breach because it's two huge regions, Lachin and Kelbejar. So for us, it's this issue of the whole nation, territorial integrity and security of the whole population of Azerbaijan. If the group of population poses a danger, and I'm sure not all Karabakh Armenians in favor of this situation, but unfortunately, the leadership of Karabakh Armenians is hijacked by people like Vardanyan. And in this regard also, if we look even at the reaction of the Armenian government and people in Armenia, I wouldn't say they kind of, yes, they of course raising the issue of the humanitarian supply, food, etc. But we've seen some negative comments about Vardanyan, because they know why he came. If we look at the also dynamic of the negotiations between Armenia and Azerbaijan, until fall, we had basically some progress made between two sides on the negotiation track. In the fall, it was all stopped. And there is related events, Valdai, Putin's speech, Vardanyan arrival, then of course, unfortunately, it's not only on the Russian side, but also the French action also, I think, undermined the negotiations. So we have the whole situation when the group of people in Karabakh, threatens the whole security situation. If 700,000 refugees should be hijacked by, let's say, 50,000, but even let's say, assume for the sake of argument, 120,000 population, it just, if we look, put at the scale, it's not the same. So yes, unfortunately, we have situation when the voice of Karabakh Armenians expressed by the person who never lived and never cared about what's happening in the region.
Okay. You know, in Azerbaijani, we have a saying, until you see the bad one, you don't appreciate the good one. Now, I am not going to call Araik Arutyunyan the good one. The government of Azerbaijan, correct me if I'm wrong, considers him a war criminal and refused to negotiate with him in any way, shape, or form. Now, when enter Vardanyan, it looks like Araik Arutyunyan was someone the people in the government were talking to. Maybe I misunderstood you. Who were the Azerbaijani government officials discussing issues with before Vardanyan? Was it not Araik Arutyunyan? Who do you think the Azerbaijani government accepted as someone who speaks on behalf of Karabakh Armenians, if it's not Araik Arutyunyan? And now that Vardanyan is there, is Araik Arutyunyan looking better?
No, unfortunately not, because also probably people, I don't know whether they know or not, the foreign audience, but Araik Arutyunyan on October 25th, he was called to Moscow. He went to Moscow, and by the way, through Lachin Road, he went flight from Armenia to Moscow. And after conversation with Moscow patrons, he went back and he delivered the so-called state minister, position of state minister to Vardanyan. So I'm afraid now the Araik Arutyunyan has no voice and he has no also the weight in Karabakh. But there are some other people which been touched with by Azerbaijani authorities. Yes, we can consider them criminals, but those Armenians, they are native Karabakh Armenians. I mean, they lived before, the conflict there, Vitaly Balasanyan and some others, and we had contacts with them. Yes, now I don't know the old names. Some people, engineers, even some locals. But we had the contacts with them, and I assume that there was a bit of promising conversation, but unfortunately it was all abrupted by the current development.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let me ask you this. Now, I've been trying to reach people in Anama in the Azerbaijani State Anti-Mine Landmine Agency, and I would like to have them come and speak to us in whatever language they prefer, Azerbaijani, preferably Russian, so people outside of Azerbaijan can hear them. I am curious about this whole landmine aspect. In Washington or in Brussels or everywhere else, when this issue is being raised, it seems to me, because I've been hearing about these conversations, it seems to me that this is something new to the people. People here or people in Europe have absolutely no idea of the context of landmines that Baku is talking about. First of all, the effectiveness of the message coming from Baku. Why do people not hear it? Maybe it is not presented in very clear terms. Let's talk about those landmines. Let's talk about the proof that Azerbaijan has. Do you think there is enough proof that can be presented to those who are skeptical in Washington, or be it in Brussels or other power capitals of the world? Secondly, what is completely bizarre to me, and this was basically supported by my conversations with Armenians. It's on my channel, people can watch it. How does it happen that a country that was defeated in a war still sends its troops officially, its conscripts, people that it conscripts in Armenia to serve in Karabakh in internationally recognized Azerbaijani territory, and does so a year and a half after the war is over? From what I hear, in July of last year, the practice stopped. Can you confirm or deny that Armenian soldiers from Armenia, are not transported through Lachin Corridor to serve in Karabakh? What is going on with that? Landmines and soldiers, please.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for these questions. I've heard many times that Azerbaijan is a bit ineffective in terms of the voicing its problem to the international audience. Let me give you some information from my personal experience. When I was ambassador in Canada, I had many encounters, conversations with Canadian journalists. And once I raised the issue of the Khojaly massacre in February 1992. It was 20th anniversary, 2012. So we wanted to make events and also the journalist coverage. Journalists told me it's not interesting because it's the old, 20 years old. Well, some people died or massacred, but it's not interesting for Canadian audience. When I ask a question, okay, it's not interesting because it happened 20 years ago, but why you are interested of events of 1915, which happened 100 years ago? They told me because it's the political question, because we have Armenian diaspora and blah, blah, blah. So that's, we have to face with such reality. And there are different, and we can speak about, for hours. And I made research on this kind of aspect of the conflict. Not only one, but several. My researchers were dedicated to that. During the conflict, and we see this, what happened. This is the legacy of Armenian occupation. Just the Western audience, they didn't want to listen. And we raised the issue of the landmines, especially after the war. We had events, several events, Geneva landmine campaign against landmines. It's a very famous organization based in Geneva, the Nobel Prize winner. So I reached out to them. We had a joint webinar with them about landmines problems. So the United Nations also supported this kind of activities. Last year, if I'm not mistaken, in March or February, also there was a big event in Baku with participation of some international experts about the landmines problem. Azerbaijan, in the list of the 10 countries in the world with the worst landmine contamination. So it's a huge problem, huge legacy of Armenian occupation. How it may continue to do that, that's the another question. I mean, and answer is clear. We used the Lachin Road to bring landmines, to bring military personnel. They initially, if we look at their reaction about accusation that the Armenians should be withdrawn, Armenian military personnel, according to the Article 4 of the trilateral statement. And this statement says not only about the military of Armenia, Republic of Armenia. It says Armenian militaries, so it's armed, any armed person. It's about any armed personnel. Should have been withdrawn long ago, but Armenia said we don't have anyone in Karabakh. Armenian government. Then in July they acknowledged, oh yes, we have it. So for a year and a half we were sending military personnel there, but they pledged to withdraw from September, beginning from September. And now, to answering to your question, whether they have withdrawn, I don't know, because they used this Lachin Road. Sometimes we used civilians, but we for sure we know that in Karabakh still we have the Armenian militaries, illegal, basically armed forces on our territory.
I'm Azerbaijani and I'm kind of following this, not really but I'm truly following the situation from the very beginning. And even I'm lost in this messaging. I'm very sorry. I have to admit it because, if I were a completely Western person, unrelated to the region, not coming from the region, I wouldn't understand your answer. My question is, let me read the comment. My viewer actually put it much better than I can. I don't think anyone cares about proof anymore. It's loud versus louder. People made up their minds about the conflict long time ago without even going into details. I kind of do agree with that because, this haphazard, very confusing messaging that is coming from Baku. Can we blame the West for not hearing our side of the story if we're unable to put the conflict in very simple terms that a Western mind can understand? You know that people don't have much time in the world. People around the world don't have much time to spend on a conflict that is not directly related to them. Even if it's a matter of justice, if they don't understand the conflict within the first 3 seconds and we launch into a very long, very windy, and very confusing explanation, they don't listen to us. Armenians put it very, very simply. Look at our poor children. They are starving, and Santa Claus didn't come there. And on the other hand, Azerbaijan is countering with what you just said in a couple of minutes. Which one do you think is better understood and better received?
Well, first of all, I don't think our stories was completely unheard. Otherwise, during the Second Karabakh War, situation was for Azerbaijan was much different, worse. I think, and I should also commend some of the coverage, for example, by New York Times. They did fair job as compared to Washington Post, and I know why, but probably you know why Washington Post was biased, and New York Times was more balanced. There was some stories about Azerbaijani refugees. There was stories about the landmine contamination after the war. So I wouldn't say it's the completely ignorance over Azerbaijani problems. But I tend just to agree that the average person, he wants black and white. He doesn't want to go into details. Who's right, who's wrong? It's like you watching the movie, the bad guys, good guys. When the stories become complicated, people just turn off, they switch the channel. So that's the nature of human beings, and we have to deal with that. Armenian has long presence in the West, diaspora. I think the factor of Christianity also plays a role, especially you mentioned Christmas, Grinch stolen Christmas, and things like that. We have the celebrities like Kardashian and some others who, helps them. So we here definitely face bias, but the scholars, I believe, a lot of scholars who wrote about this conflict, were more tuned to the situation. and they speak about Orientalism. It's the academic term about the bias of Western bias towards the Muslim majority countries. This is what we are facing. So we can blame sometimes Azerbaijani government or just general Azerbaijan, and it's not only about this current government. And probably we are at the same age, or more or less. And we remember during Elchibey. Let's recall that the American-US Congress, we punished Elchibey government in 1992 when the Azerbaijan was lost and Lachin was occupied. Shusha was
So what you're
occupied.
saying,
The same-
Azerbaijan had a democratic government and still ended up with sanctions against it as an aggressor.
regardless who's ruling Azerbaijan, what kind of government we have, regardless whether it's pro-Western, pro-Eastern, whatever, we are facing discrimination. That's it. And these 907 amendments, notorious amendments, which punished Azerbaijan during a time when the Azerbaijan lost its territories, that indeed the best proof of the bias against Azerbaijan.
Okay, for a second, let's agree with that. Let's agree with the fact that the world, especially the West, will always be biased against Azerbaijan because A, Azerbaijan is a majority Muslim country, and B, because they identify us and we identify ourselves with Turks.
Yeah.
What can be done in this environment? Is there a messaging, a more coherent, more clear, more simple, more black or white messaging, do you think, given your experience of serving as an ambassador in Canada, that the Western audience will understand? For instance, while you were talking, I was showing the videos of Agdam. They called Agdam Hiroshima of the West. This year I heard it myself in Strasbourg during the parliamentary session. Do you think these kinds of videos are getting out of Azerbaijan much? Do you think Azerbaijan can do something to counter, even if we presume that what you're saying is right, even if you presume that the West is inherently against Azerbaijan because of Islamophobia or Turkophobia? Is there something that Azerbaijan can do in this regard?
Yes, Azerbaijan can do and did something, as I said, when you speak, I speak with the more informed partner, with some experts, or some politicians. I came to conclusion they know about situation. Azerbaijan put a lot of investment into PR campaign. Now we are accused that it's, the government, caviar diplomacy, whatever. Armenians doing the same, but Armenia has advantage. They are locals in United States. They put money into campaign of Bob Menendez or Adam Schiff, and it's local money. It's and when the foreign government comes to say they should be go through registration, fora and etc. So there is the system when you can track the foreign the government's money. So in that situation, of course, the Armenian has much more advantage. But I would say situation is a bit changing. We have quite active diaspora activists in the United States, in Canada. I think we're doing a quite good job in some European countries. And some stories, I wouldn't say the whole stories, but there's some stories about landmines, about destructions, the Hiroshima of the Caucasus. It went to the Western audience. So we have to continue fighting on this media space.
This question is uncomfortable, and please feel free to answer to the extent you feel comfortable answering. But do you think part of the problem is the Armenian narrative? And I'll repeat what they're saying. You have no freedom in Azerbaijan. You have no civil society in Azerbaijan. Your environmentalists are environmentalist. And some Azerbaijanis who write about this issue, I will not name her name, but she is a former colleague of mine and she's a former friend of mine, discusses this in the Western media, saying that Azerbaijani environmentalists should be put in quotation marks because Azerbaijan apparently doesn't have environmentalists. Which I think is untrue because I interviewed them, as I said. But do you think the messaging from Baku would be more coherent and more believable, more plausible to the Western audiences if Azerbaijan had more vibrant civil society, if the people in civil society could raise their voice independently. You probably would remember me arguing with one of the Western politicians who surprised me with his lack of knowledge of Azerbaijan, although he's been flying to Azerbaijan more than I have in the last 15 years. He should have known what's going on. He should have known the origin of the conflict, but he didn't. They think, and I'll be very blunt with you, they think in the West that Azerbaijani people would be happy to give Karabakh away if it were not for the dictatorial government of Ilham Aliyev. And when they're presented with the proof of the opposite, they don't know what to think anymore. They don't know what to say anymore. They're just stunned. Do you think if we had a freer, more vibrant civil society, we could make our case better to the global audience?
Well, generally, again, I've heard these accusations, democracy versus autocracy and the conflict. I have written also about this issue. If we look at the conflict, when conflict began in 1987-88, current government was not in existence. Current leaders were not in existence. So it's problem which indeed we have some century ago legacy. And I think it's the imperial legacy. Also, the concept of divide and rule. So that is additional factor to some territorial issues. So I don't want now to go to issue of the resettlements, etc. So again, that's indeed will prolong our conversation. Civil societies, more or less, I mean, people agree. We have very little impact on the conflict resolution. We've seen that there was some activities of civil societies. We met in Tbilisi, in Brussels, where there was the EU funding. Armenian civil society, very nationalistic. They, sometimes trying to Pashinyan portray himself as a democrat. Look, it's him, Pashinyan, who was drunk and dancing in Shusha. He himself said that Karabakh is Armenia on August 5th in 2019. It was Pashinyan who said that the Khojaly massacre is the conspiracy. He repeated conspiracy theories of Armenian nationalists. It was Pashinyan who was speaking about Tigran the Great, 2,000 years of Armenian statehood. So that's quote-unquote Pashinyan democracy, and he never said, okay, Armenia is a democratic country, we are going to accept Azerbaijani refugees from Armenia. Come back to the prosperous, democratic Armenia. You are citizens of Armenia. You lived here. You have property here. We restitute your properties. Never said about that. No any quote-unquote Democrats in Armenia. So I think it will be a big mistake to think in terms of that somehow democracy here. I mean, even in Armenia, let's say for the sake of argument, I accept, those saying, there's lack of democracy. But look at what's happening in Armenia and civil society in Armenia, especially during the war and after the war. I was watching the videos of some Armenian peace activist, Tatul Hakopian, and etc. He was saying, I'm taking the arms, I'm going to fight Azerbaijanis. So that's the peace activist. Some of Armenians, I don't want name calling, but I've seen that. And I mean, everyone's seen that. I think who follows the conflict. So I don't think here we need not bottom to top, from top to bottom approach. That's the situation in the Caucasus, and that's the reality.
Mm-hmm. Interesting, but this top to bottom approach, I understand what you're saying, and maybe some of the arguments I do accept. But this top to bottom approach might work in Azerbaijan, but it might not work in Armenia, because the people of Armenia not only elected Pashinyan, but they also re-elected Pashinyan after the defeat of 2020 war. Do you think Pashinyan is able to make compromise that is necessary? Let's compare the two leaders. Let's compare the compromise that needs to be made by Armenia and by Azerbaijan for this conflict to be resolved. let's imagine Russia for 1 second is looking the other way, and the two countries can get together in one room, discuss the problems openly and honestly, put everything on the table, and achieve compromise. Which side do you think will have more legitimacy? The side that is elected by the people and re-elected after the war, or the side of Azerbaijan?
Well, I think on this issue, President of Azerbaijan full support of his population, not only support but demand of population. Again, I'm referring to the mass protest in July 2020 before the war. All these years, actually, the opposition and some people are demanding when we are going to return our territories. I can accept the difficulty which Pashinyan is facing domestically. If he would say, okay, let's acknowledge Karabakh as a part of Armenia. But I also have heard that from some Armenians that the situation after the war has changed, and there is some segment of population which don't want the second or third war, let's say. So we understand that we should have some platform based on the territorial integrity, both countries. So the Armenians speak now in volume about territorial integrity of their country. They didn't speak about that before the war because they occupied in our territory. So they speak now about in terms of the situation after September 2022. So let's do that. I mean, I know there was some conversations between Armenian and Azerbaijani leaders. There was some rapprochement, I would say rapprochement, but at least dialogue. We had documents going back and forth. Again, I think I know also about the opposition within Armenian society. But look, after Pashinyan said that we have to, we don't object to the 5 points offered by Azerbaijan, which includes the principle of territorial integrity. Yes, there was some protest in Yerevan, but those protesters were not able to do anything significant in Armenia. So I think there is potential for the peace, for the peace talks, for peace in the region. Unfortunately, we have spoilers, geopolitical spoilers.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk about the geopolitical spoilers, if you don't mind. Who do you think is interested in Armenian-Azerbaijani peace treaty, lasting peace treaty, not ceasefire agreement, not some document that we have been referring to since November of 2020, but an omni bill, let's say omni peace treaty that would cover all aspects of peaceful coexistence of two countries. Is Russia an agent for good or for the bad? What role is the West playing? And when I'm asking about the West, I'm kind of curious as to, do you think with its rhetoric, the West is emboldening one of the sides of the conflict to continue their intransigent position? What role is Turkey playing? I mean, we know that Armenians they're not likely to trust Turkey. Let's talk about Iran. Let's talk about Israel. So if we're talking about geopolitics, I'm giving you a free rein. Please take as much time as you need to answer. But I would really like to know whom Baku perceives as partners in reaching peace in the region, and who are the spoilers, as you called them?
Okay, yeah, I'll try to be brief because it's indeed very huge issue. This is indeed we talked about that. Again, I would like to return to this topic of bias, Turkophobia, Islamophobia. If we look at the history of the occupation, Armenian occupation, and the history of conflict, we've seen that indeed some Western liberals, Russian liberals, and also some of governments, Western and on the East, let's say, they had common view, common bias against Azerbaijan. When it came, for example, to territorial integrity of Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova, it was unequivocal support to the territorial integrity of those countries. When it comes to the Azerbaijan-Armenian situation, their voice were ambiguous. We've seen that from the West. But now I wouldn't call I wouldn't talk about the collective West. Situation radically changed after Russian-Ukrainian war. So there are countries in the West which would like to make indeed real contribution to the peace talks. I'm speaking about the US administration. I'm not speaking about US Congress because it's fully in the hands, not fully, but very heavily influenced by the Armenian lobby. And Armenian lobby, indeed, one of the geopolitical spoilers outside of the region, which prevents the peace and security in the region. With regard to Russia, we know their 200 years policy, imperial policy, one of the causes of current conflict, Armenian resettlement, divide and rule, and again, the cliche about Stalin, etc. Again, this is a long conversation. So I just would like to underline, I think Russia doesn't want another war in the region. It would like to have situation frozen as it is, but not fully resolved, including the issue of Karabakh. That's why in the proposal which Russia made recently with regard to peace treaty, they said that the Karabakh issue should be postponed and resolved later. That's their strategy, to keep two countries under control, under their influence, etc. And that strategy is failing. I told that repeatedly several times, including to my Russian colleagues. You know, Russian influence fading away in both countries, in Armenia, in Azerbaijan, but also in Armenia, which is military. They are in military partnership, economic partnership, in the same union, military and economic union. Because that's not the strategy Russia should pursue in the region. But unfortunately, people who is making decision, they are very old-minded. Okay, better to have conflict through which I can somehow influence. That's the Russian interest, yes, to keep the situation under control, frozen, but not resolved. I think for the collective West, I wouldn't call it collective West. The United States is really interested and trying to make input in the conflict resolution. I'm speaking about, again, a US administration, not US Congress. France, unfortunately, you know, it was always spoilers. And on many issues, not only the South Caucasus from the time of de Gaulle, and you know, again, it's the long history. On some issues, we had the spoilers in Europe, and we see those spoilers now in the context not only our problem but Ukrainian-Russian problem. So I would say Europeans mostly, they don't have any leverage in the region individually. The France is trying to say, you know, we are still big powers and we can have influence and we will have influence. And many things which France is doing in the context of Armenian-Azerbaijan relations, it's the collateral damage, it's their standoff with Turkey.
Pardon me, does France have an ability to project power in the region? I mean, whether alone or as a leading voice in the European Union, can France do something?
They can do harm to Azerbaijan. They try to do recently in United Nations Security Council. And I think the deployment of the EU mission, also the French initiative. Yes, they can do, but they don't have really leverage. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not up to France to do anything in the South Caucasus. I think the UK is also they are not active player, UK in the region, I mean, politically, yes, economically, but they have better understanding of the situation. They also in favor of durable peace and security. Our immediate neighbors, Turkey. Yeah, you said that Armenia does not trust Turkey, but you know, the Turkey for long ago they wanted to have to normalize the relationship with Armenia. But it's Armenia who actually not only launched the war against Azerbaijan, but virtually we can speak that they launching war in virtual space, in political space against Turkey. Let's recall that 2 months before the war, the Second Karabakh War, Armenian leadership basically claimed Turkish territory. I can refer to the article of the former Armenian president's advisor, Gerard Libardian, when Armenia began talking about Treaty of Serfs in it was August 2020. Basically, it was the territorial claims towards Turkey. I think, and I believe, Turkey wants to normalize the relationship, but we know that until Armenia have claims, not only to Azerbaijan, but general with ambition, we had these ambitions. Again, I can recall that the former president of Armenia, Serge Sargsyan, once said that, my generation, I quote him, my generation resolved the issue of Karabakh, next generation should resolve the issue of Western Armenia. So that we should put in the context. But Turkey is ready to normalize relationship with Armenia once Azerbaijan and Armenia reach peace treaty. With regard to Iran, yes, it's more difficult. Thanks bringing Gerard Libardian. He talked about that. With regard to Iran, it's also very difficult neighbor. All these years we supported Armenia. The victory of Azerbaijan in the Second Karabakh War was shock to Iran, and at the same time, Iran understands that Azerbaijan is not alone. We have basically military union with Turkey, so we have to take that into account. But the aggressive stance against Azerbaijan remains, though we see that the last 2 months, Iranian government, it looks like they would like to down tension between. It's indeed very strange situation. We have on Armenian sides Iran, historic now Russia, France, and some other Western countries. So probably we should speak more about Turkophobia. This is what you also mentioned in your question. As far as other players like Israel and ours, China, well, I don't think they have really, Israel, of course, they have close relationship with Azerbaijan, but in terms of the process between Armenia and Azerbaijan, those powers don't have any leverage.
Farid, forgive me for asking this question bluntly again, but looking from the United States, especially in this geopolitical climate, I'm looking at Armenia as a military ally of Russia, as a country whose border is protected by the Russian troops. I'm putting it in the context of Nancy Pelosi, the former U.S. House Speaker, visiting the Republic of Armenia and crying there. Whether she realized or not that her baggage was or the baggage of her delegation, I should say, was checked by the Russian FSB, I don't know. On the other hand, you have Armenia, whose ally is Iran. Is that the failure of Azerbaijani diplomacy to not clearly demonstrate that Armenia has two allies in the region who are considered hostile powers by the United States and Europe, Iran and Russia? I mean, what else does Armenia have to do? Put a big neon sign on its forehead? I mean, why does Azerbaijan not get this message across? I'm just curious.
Well, again, there is the historical context. Speaking about Iran and Azerbaijan, again, it's the whole conversation about the underlying issues. The South Azerbaijan, it's about the theocratic regime in Iran, trying to use religious slogans and religious network. That's the one thing. With regard to, I think Azerbaijan is doing something, trying to reach out to the West and to some audience. We established good partnership with Israel, so that's our counteraction towards the Iranian-Armenian alliance. And if you ask people in Pentagon, they don't think that the Pelosi did the right thing, going to Armenia, and they saying, okay, it's just the local politics. It doesn't have any effect. Pelosi, that was indeed now she basically gone as a speaker. What's they doing? Some of the members of Congress they doing for the local indeed environment, for the local constituency. They got fundings, they got contributions to the elections campaign, and they have to return that at some point in their career. So this is what the Pelosi was doing. Back to the summary of the questions. No, I think Azerbaijan is reaching out to some countries. We're establishing alliances, partnership, a non-alignment movement. I know sometimes was skeptical why we're doing that, but non-alignment movement, for example, was very instrumental in the Security Council in October 2020 and recently too. So two countries, Albania and Emirates, they objected to the French draft of the statement, which was very prepared for the Security Council with regard to Lachin. So we're doing some pretty nice diplomatic job. But again, we are facing, when it comes to the local politics in Europe and in the United States, it's all about constituencies.
Okay, let me ask you this. The Minsk Group. The Prime Minister of Armenia, Nikol Pashinyan, brings up the Minsk Group like an egg timer all the time. He talks about it all the time in almost every statement. I've been watching his statements before the war, during the, before the new year, and before and during the whole situation in Lachin, on the Lachin road, has escalated. Is the Minsk Group, as the Azerbaijani government sees it, do you think the Minsk Group is alive? Do you think the Minsk Group is still relevant? If it is not, is it possible that Nikol Pashinyan is not getting that message? Why do Armenia and Azerbaijan regard them, have such a divergent view, even on who is supposed to mediate the conflict? I mean, how can we talk about the mediation if the two sides cannot even agree on who is mediating it right now? I mean, this should be pretty clear, right? What is the source of the confusion with the Minsk Group, do you think?
Well, you say Minsk Group was a format. We worked with Minsk Group. That's the reality. And by the way, the Minsk Group came to existence in March 1992, even before the whole occupation happened, Shusha, Lachin, etc. So there was hope that through the European institution, OSCE, at that time it called CSCE, so we will reach some, mutual agreement. Unfortunately, it didn't work because of Armenian occupations. So they produced a document called Madrid Principles, Basic Principles, 2007, 2009, updated. But what happened? It was Armenia refused to implement. They insisting on status for Karabakh first as guarantee of basically independence. And in March, April 2020, the Armenian Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued several statements saying we don't discuss any documents. Basically, they shut down the Madrid Principles. Now, after the war, Azerbaijan regards it's our right that the Madrid Principle is irrelevant because basically because the philosophy of Madrid Principles, which was produced by the Minsk Group, was the peaceful resolution. We didn't reach peaceful resolution. We made Armenia to accept and to liberate our territories. So that's completely different situation. We sacrificed the life of our citizens to liberate our territories. So Madrid Principles are irrelevant. Minsk Group also irrelevant because basically what situation was after the Second Karabakh War. We had three countries colliding with each other, especially after Russian-Ukrainian war. We are not going to work together. And also we now perceive that countries like France cannot be honest brokers in these negotiations. But we have formats. We had format, EU format, Charles Michel. We had Moscow format. Again, the questions about this format. But EU was, I think, was relatively successful. But who destroyed that? The Armenia, because they demanded that plus to three parties, EU, Charles Michel, Azerbaijan, Armenia. they insisted on the introduction of France, Macron, and they basically destroyed by this format. So maybe they, in this year, hopefully, we will resume something. But again, back to question about Minsk Group. Why Pashinyan is still referring to Minsk Group? I don't know. I don't think he, sometimes he, within one day, he changes his opinions. So it's hard. I mean, it's obvious that Minsk Group is not going to work.
Look, from what I understand, and maybe again I'm mistaken, Russia immediately signaled its displeasure with the EU format, with sending the observers to the Armenian side of the border, with negotiations in the EU format, as you call them, with Charles Michel. And Pashinyan made that statement, that actually not a statement, but set forth that condition that the French President Emmanuel Macron be present after his trip to Moscow. Do you think it was Moscow that derailed that set of negotiations?
I think they made a lot of contributions to the derailment of this process.
They did. Russia did.
Yes, they did. They did, yes.
Mm-hmm. Which brings me to another question. You already spoke about Russia. You spoke about the role of Russia, that Russia played in starting this conflict. Russia's aspirations to freeze this conflict for a generation. We all saw the statement of Lavrov. I think people in Baku were as surprised as many people outside the country who read that or saw that, myself included. Was it a good idea to begin with to allow Russian peacekeepers in? I mean, I know that I'm asking a very tough question, and I know that you might not be able to answer it as openly as you would like to. But shifting ground, justification for Russian presence. Oh, if we didn't let them, they would have bombed us. If we didn't let them in, they were coming anyway. They would have occupied us. This, in my heart as an Azerbaijani, I never made peace with Russian troops, with Russian boots in my country, and there are many of us. Do you think that was a mistake?
No, I don't think that was a mistake. That was reality. But, I just would like, before coming to this issue, peacekeeping, there is no radical strategic problems between Russia and Azerbaijan. We had in the 90s, this government worked to smooth those problems. Because indeed, in the 90s, we faced with both collective West, again, amendments 907, and some other actions of the European government's parliamentarians. And throughout the conflict, we've seen that. So we've been alone. At that time in 90s, Turkey could not, for different reasons, they did not extend that support to us. So we worked, this government, this leader worked to remove some problems between two countries. We worked also with Turkey to strengthen our relationship. We sent military officers to Turkey. We signed very important treaty in 2010. So basically our military alliance with Turkey began in 2010. Strong military alliance. Before we had also, interaction and partnership. So again, Russia opted for this divide and rule policy. Maybe they will change. We don't know, but at least Russia is neighbor, big neighbor, and that's the reality. Reality of 2008, 2014, and 2022. So we, as a small country, we have to accept this reality. So I'm now talking maybe a bit more diplomat. As a diplomat, yes, and I have experience as a diplomat. This is what you have to take into account to keep your country not be bombed. With regard to the deployment of peacekeeping forces, yeah, I mean, if we look at what was happening already in the beginning of November in some of the Russian websites, they were saying that the Russia is delivering additional equipment and the personnel to Armenia to move to Karabakh. And also would like to bring your attention, very important fact. Unfortunately, during the Second Karabakh War, we've seen also pressure from the West. And looking at the statement from Carnegie, at the articles which were published, Carnegie Corporation, Carnegie Endowment, basic article was when Russia is going to interfere. Very good expert on the conflict, Tom DeVal, was tweeting when Russia is going to interfere in this conflict. So we've seen that from the many Western liberals demand Russia has to interfere in this conflict. So Azerbaijan was facing Armenia, Russia, collective West, Iran. So that's why we have the Russian peacekeeping force. And sometimes, speaking frankly, with Russia, you can come to some terms, not all terms, but to some terms much more easily than with some Western policymakers like Nancy Pelosi.
Okay. If you're not tired, I have several more questions, but we've been talking for more than an hour.
No, I'm not tired, but I think for the audience, maybe we won't extend too much because their attention span is coming down. Maybe we'll leave something for the second chat.
Okay. Okay, I got you. Let me ask you a couple of questions. Turkish troops. Let's do a blitz. Let's do them quickly. After the war, a lot of people in Azerbaijan were expecting that Turkish troops will be serving in that area, and there will be a military presence on par with the Russian troops. I remember all the discussions, I remember all the arguments, and that was the expectation of the Azerbaijani people. Where are they? Who prevented them from coming?
Turkish troops? You mean, I didn't get it. We have Russian-Turkish Monitoring Center. Mm-hmm. We have some of the military experts, but I don't think we were speaking about large-scale Turkish troops on Azerbaijan territory.
We were not talking about the Turkish peacekeepers. There was no expectation in Azerbaijan that together with Russians, the Turks will arrive?
Well, only 60 people from both sides. That's it. And they are in the monitoring center. That's it.
Mm-hmm. The relations between Azerbaijan and Turkey right now, in what condition are they? Are they good?
Very excellent.
Mm-hmm. There are no problems. Okay. Rhetoric. When we look at the Armenian rhetoric right now, does it remind you of the rhetoric before the war? In other words, I'm trying to understand what the people in Baku see. Did the rhetoric of the Armenian leadership, establishment, political power centers change much after the 2020 war? Personally, if you allow me, looking at Twitter, reading the opinion makers in Armenia on social media, to me, it seems exactly the same. I see the same allusions. I would call them racist, but I leave it to my audience to decide. To Azerbaijanis, lack of culture, nomads, Coca-Cola. We know all this laundry list. It seems to me that nothing has changed much after the 2020 war. What do you think that rhetoric is indicative of? Is Armenia preparing a revenge, another war, basically?
Yeah, you're right. Unfortunately, all this list of accusations and propaganda and sometimes show calls for action from the international community versus countries, Luxembourg, I don't know, and some other countries. We should understand it's up to us to decide our fate, Armenia and Azerbaijan, and we have this chance to decide. Now, again, with the same conversation about, ethnic cleansing, genocide, we had in 1987, 88, the same conversation when Armenians lived in Baku and quite wealthy community. I think if they look strategically, they lost the whole Azerbaijani oil industry. They were very heavily present here. They were across Azerbaijan with good positions in the government. Nobody was discriminating them. There was maybe some issues within the Soviet system. I think all people were more or less discriminated against the context of the Soviet law. But anyway, that's the history. Unfortunately, we see the same rhetoric. But whether we're preparing to the third war, no, I don't think so. I mean, they are not. Maybe part of them crazy, saying, okay, let's take the rifles and go against Azerbaijan. But more sober people, I think what they would like to do, to postpone the issue, resolution of these issues between two countries, not to sign peace treaty, not to recognize Azerbaijan's sovereignty of Karabakh, and wait for the right geopolitical moment. Maybe something happened in 5, 10, 15 years. I think especially, I don't want to again, name calling, but what I've heard from quite reliable sources, Pashinyan got some advisors, both from West and Russia, and they came and they're working now, and we're saying, okay, let's make at least this, if any document to sign, very elusive, very ambiguous, but postpone issue. Let's see what's happening in Turkey, what's happening in Russian-Ukrainian war, what's happening with the West, with US administration, and maybe in 10, 15 years, 20 years, situation will change and they will make, yes, revanche.
Mm. One last question, and I've been holding this question for a while, trying to get it in. Yalchin Mammadov is asking, question to dear guest. Azerbaijani officials often draw parallels between Lachin and Zangezur corridors. How relevant is this comparison, considering that those are completely different things? I know that this is, I've saved the best for last, but this question is on everybody's mind, including my own. I've been watching the President Aliyev, President of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, on New Year's Eve. His address to the people, to the nation. Zangezur Corridor is once again being brought up by Azerbaijan. What is the relevance? Can we compare the two? Does one depend on the other? Is it a fair argument to say if Lachin Corridor is not, if it is in existence and Zangezur isn't, then the situation is unfair and Azerbaijan closes that. Is it possible that Azerbaijan would close Lachin Corridor because it is mentioned in the trilateral document? And most importantly, you as a diplomat, and I'm pretty sure you're better versed in international law than me, does it mean that the Armenian Karabakh Armenians somehow have the agency, in Russian we'll call it subyektность, because a road connects them to Armenia? What does a road connect whom and to whom? Whereas we know that Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic is part of Azerbaijan, it has a status, it's internationally recognized, and it's connecting to Azerbaijan, if that corridor comes into existence. But what does Lachin Road connect? I don't understand. The center of Azerbaijan with a foreign state with whom we fought 2 wars?
Yeah, thanks for bringing this question. I think we need indeed clarify a number of issues related to that. First of all, term corridors, again, it's the transportation term, logistical term, not the international law in terms of international law, because the sovereignty of Lachin remains in Azerbaijan, and the same trilateral statement reconfirms that. We're speaking about, yes, humanitarian logistics. The Karabakh Armenians live on Azerbaijani territory, and they would like to be somehow connected with Armenia. That's temporarily. I mean, ideally in the future, all transportation communications, all transportation routes should be unblocked. That's the trilateral statement. So ideally, several years from now, we won't have any corridors. We will have open transportation. When we're making comparison with Zangezur, probably we should explain better Azerbaijani side. We don't make comparison in terms of the international law, in terms of the legal jurisdiction over Zangezur and Lachin. Jurisdiction over Lachin in Azerbaijani hands, and jurisdiction in Zangezur on the Armenian side. We never claim extraterritorial status. It's the myth which Armenian tried to raise in order to block this kind of the Zangezur passage. Okay, they're saying it's not called corridor, but the notion of corridor in trilateral statement, it says unimpeded in Russian, беспрепятственный, unimpeded movement of people and cargo. And it will be guarded by the Russians. Anyway, the whole border is guarded by the Armenian border, guarded by Russians. So we don't claim extraterritorial status, but what we claim it's unimpeded access to Nakhchivan. And we are ready, and we actually gave already unimpeded access between Armenian and Karabakh Armenians. We didn't surrender our sovereignty. It's not in documents. But ideally, again, in the future, once we will sign peace treaty and development will follow, all transportations routes will be opened. But of course, we should be realistic. For the near future, we need some sort of the assurances of security assurances. That's why we insist on this Zangezur, on Migri section. Armenians, for example, said the Pashinyan made recently a proposal, oh, we're opening 3 roads, but who is going to guard Azerbaijani, let's say, car driver coming through, going from Azerbaijan to Nakhchivan through other Armenian territory? So that the segment, short segment, that is indeed very convenient for all 3 sides, now Russia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, to have the security arrangement. So parallel in terms of, again, logistics, not in terms of the jurisdiction.
All right. Well, thank you for withstanding all the
Thank you.
questioning for an hour and 20 minutes. I do appreciate your time, and I do hope that we continue this conversation at a later time. We're open to you, and we're open to your colleagues who would like to come and comment, because we do believe that on our channel, at least, the voice of the government and of the state is not as present as we would want it to be. And also, if you can help us, put us in touch with ANAMA, with the Azerbaijani Anti-Mining Agency, because I have some questions about the mines, landmines that are being freshly laid in Azerbaijan, that result in killings of civilians, and which really infuriates me, of my colleagues, of journalists. I do appreciate your time, Farid Shafiyev, and thank you for coming. Right.
Thank you for time, and again, I'll try to do my best. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching. This is our first broadcast of 2023. It's already 2023, imagine that. We do, from time to time, provide content in English, and many people are asking us as to why are we doing this. I was reading the comments online from our Azerbaijani audience. Why are 2 Azerbaijanis speaking English to each other? I believe it is very important for the voices of Azerbaijan to be heard around the world. I do not boast the audience of large international media conglomerates, but I do believe that those who want to hear what we have to say can easily find our channel and listen. That is why we will be continuing to provide programming in English as well, to the best of our ability from time to time. And those of you who stumbled upon our channel by accident today for the first time, please do like and share our content, interact with it, because it really helps us grow and bring our content to people who have never heard of us before, just maybe like yourselves. I appreciate your time, and from Washington, D.C., I'm Ismail Jalilov. Until we meet again, bye-bye.